Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. You'll have to give me a little bit of grace today because I am pretty under the weather, but the show must go on because I need to get caught up on some ARCs, which are advanced reader copies. And thankfully, I have received the three that we're going to go through in this video from NetGalley, and I am so appreciative of the opportunity to receive and read these ARCs. So it's very important to me that I catch up on them and I don't fall behind, and I make sure to turn in my reviews on them as soon as possible because I really want to be able to continue to get ARCs. And so I've got three that are due in September. So we're going to try to get through all three of those in this vlog. And the first one that we're going to start with is Pantomime by L.R. Lamb. And just a little preface before I give you the synopsis of this book and we jump into reading. Pantomime technically is a republishing of this book. So I believe that L.R. Lamb started publishing this series back in 2013 with their original publisher, and then the publisher closed before the third book in the trilogy was released. They then were able to complete publication of the trilogy with a different publisher, and now with their current publisher, they have decided to re-release all of them. And this is something that we've seen with some authors, and I'm not talking about those who go from indie publishing or self-publishing into traditional publishing and then they actually have editors and reviewers, etc. But I'm talking more about authors like Samantha Shannon, who recently re-released her Bone Season series, which was a series that she started writing when she was very young, and she wanted to revise and edit and re-release those. And so this is a similar situation with L.R. Lamb and the Pantomime trilogy. And so L.R. Lamb has said personally that they do prefer that people read this series. They appreciate the original release for what it was at the age that they were at and at the time that they were publishing and writing. However, they've now revised it and they feel that you should not mix and match the series and you should just pick up with these new ones and treat them as separate entities. So I was really excited to receive Pantomime as an art copy for this re-release. And if you're not familiar with L.R. Lamb, they also wrote the Dragonfall duology, which I previously read and really enjoyed. And so I'm really excited to hop into Pantomime. So let me give you the synopsis before we start reading. And I believe the trilogy might be called the Micah Gray trilogy because I think that's the main character of the books. I personally haven't read the previous release edition, so this will be my first time getting into these books and reading them. But the synopsis says, in a land of lost wonders, the past is stirring once more. Micah runs away from a debutante's life at home and joins the circus, harboring two secrets. One, he was born between male and female, and two, he may have powers last seen in mysterious beings from an almost forgotten age. Micah discovers the joy of flight as an aerialist, courting his trapeze partner, and confiding in the mysterious white clown, Dristan. He finally feels free, but the circus has a dark side and Micah's past isn't done with him. Meanwhile, the strange ghost of a woman with damselfly wings whispers to Micah that only he can help magic return to the realm, and he fears she may be right. Micah has much to learn, and he must do it quickly before his past and future collide with catastrophic consequences. So I think that sounds really exciting. L.R. Lamb has written both some fantasy and science fiction, and I think revising these books was a bit of a return to fantasy for this author. And so I'm really excited to hop into it, and that is going to be our first book that we read for my catching up on ARC's reading vlog. So stay tuned, and I will update you when I get to about the 50% mark. Friends, I am down with the sickness, okay? But the show must go on, so we're gonna make this happen. I am a little over halfway through Pantomime, so I don't think I'm quite at the 60% mark. Okay, I'm literally at 59%, but you know, if you ever read ARCs or like EPUBs that aren't necessarily formatted for Kindle. Sometimes the Kindle has a little bit of a hard time telling where you're at in the file because it's more like a PDF. So sometimes it just has a hard time with that. But I believe I'm about just shy of 60% through the book. And so far, I am really enjoying it. I do still really like L.R. Lamb's writing. And I'm definitely feeling like this one seems even a little more refined than Dragonfall and Emberclaw, even though those are two of their more recent releases. So I am really enjoying that. I feel like it reads very smoothly, and I'm really interested to figure out what's going to happen in the trilogy. The first book is definitely setting me up to be hooked to find out more in the next two books in the trilogy, because there's definitely a magic system at play that we haven't learned a lot about, but it's been hinted about. And there are some species or characters that are thought to be a thing of the past, but several things have happened in the book so far to lead you to believe that that may not be true, that they may be coming back. So I'm really excited to continue to read and finish the book and see where that goes. And I will say that our main character in the book, I believe, is intersex. It hasn't been explicitly explained what their situation is, but based on my understanding, they are intersex, so they do have both male and female genitalia. And I think that L.R. Lamb is doing such a good job of depicting how that individual feels about themselves, the societal pressures that they've faced. For example, when they were brought up as a child, they were told that they were a girl, even though they are intersex and their parents are aware. So, how that impacted them, and then how they're trying to figure out what they really align with and what they want throughout the story, I think is so interesting. I do feel that this is honestly an area and an experience that most authors don't consider. And I don't feel like I'm aware of many books that approach this topic and try to explain how someone who is born in an intersex body might feel, because that is something that biologically does naturally happen in nature, but it is uncommon. So I don't think we get told stories with these types of characters a lot. And I am really interested to see where that goes and what happens with the character and how they kind of come into themselves more and find themselves and figure out how they wish to identify outside of society's pressures, and then what might be assumed of them based on just how their body is physically structured. So far I'm finding the book really interesting because I've never read a book with this type of character. So I'm looking forward to finishing the book. I think I'll finish it pretty quickly, and I should come back to you with an update pretty soon. I'm hoping that this can be my one silver lining of being sick, is that maybe I'll be able to read a little bit more, because I'm not really feeling up to doing anything else. So I will update you once I have finished the book, give you my star rating, and then we'll move into our second arc for the video. All right, friends. Well, unfortunately, I did not miraculously get better between the last clip and this one, but I did, however, finish Pantomime by L.R. Lamb. So I wanted to give you my final thoughts on the book before we move on to our next arc. So I do think I'm going to rate Pantomime 4 stars, although I feel not 100% confident in that rating, not because there's anything that's nagging me about the book, but I also just wanted a little bit more from the book, but I don't have any chief complaints about the book. So I don't know if you're seeing the problem here, but I didn't have any major issues with it, but it also didn't blow me away. So I think in my mind, I'm questioning, like, am I being too hard on it and rating it too low? Or am I being too generous and rating it too high? But for me, it genuinely felt like a 4-star read. So some of the positives I already talked about. I really like that L.R. Lamb chose to tell this story from the perspective of an intersex individual who is trying to find themselves after being trapped in a family that was forcing them into the gender stereotypes that normally align with being a woman. And unfortunately, they were considering doing some things against the main character's will, and that's what led to the character running away. So I do really, really like that the story focused on a character that we don't typically see in books. We don't get a lot of representation for intersex individuals. And I thought that that concept was really, really interesting. I think my main complaint with the book is that the thing that was the most interesting to me about the story was this like component of magic and of other species. They refer to them as chimera, that is kind of lingering in the background of the entire book. And there are questions about, do chimeras still exist? Are they coming back? What is a chimera like? Do chimeras have powers? And you really don't get a lot of answers related to that in the first book. And I think that's intentional. I think it's done that way to set up for the next book in the trilogy, but it just made me want more. I think I genuinely just ended up feeling like the first book really was just a setup book for book two, which when I'm reading a series, I want each book to individually be great on its own and then be even better when you bring them together. But I feel like this book could not stand alone by itself without the other books in the trilogy, because you have hints at those things. And I do think at the end you do get a couple of minor answers about that, but it wasn't as much information as I would have liked to have had by the end of the book. When I read the last like sentence of the book and then I clicked to go to the next page and it was the acknowledgments, I actually was really caught off guard because I had no idea the book was about to end. So I felt like it wasn't really a cliffhanger of an ending. It was just super abrupt. So I definitely want to keep reading the story because I'm invested in the character and I'm invested in where the story is going to go. But I just felt like I wanted a little bit more. I almost felt like this entire book was just the exposition for the next book. So I think that's why I'm a bit conflicted about my rating, because I really like L.R. Lamb's writing. I like the characters, I like the plot, the pace was really good, and I'm really intrigued by the book. But because it felt like it was just exposition for the next book in the series, that was frustrating for me. But I do think I'm gonna solidly rate it 4 stars, and honestly, I probably could rate it higher because I think the compliments that I have for the book are higher than the complaint that I have about the book. I think those weigh a little more heavily, and I might rate it a little higher. I just think I need some time to sit with it and decide how I really 100% feel about that. But it's not giving me 5-star feelings. It might be giving me like 4.25, 4.5. I don't know. I need to think about it a little bit, but overall, I did really like the book and I would recommend it. I think it's a really interesting story with a unique perspective. So, the second arc that we're going to move into for today's vlog is Remember Where You've Buried the Bodies by Julie Lancaster. And I'll quickly read you the synopsis. So, this does say it's going to be a darkly humorous serial killer thriller, which I think is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm hoping will be a really, really fast read for me. Normally, for me, thriller with a little bit of humor would be synonymous with being quick, fast paced, and a pretty fast read for me. So I'm hopeful that that's the case. All right, so it says, what happens when a serial killer forgets that he's a killer? At Sunset House, the tea is barely introduced to a tea bag. The carpets are permanently flecked with glitter, and care assistant Jolene would rather be watching daytime television than caring for the elderly. But someone might just have confessed to murder. Most think Gilbert's sudden claim, "when I killed her," is likely to be the dementia talking. Or a spoiler for Midsummer Murders. Probably. Now, between bingo, staff drama, and a suspicious game of pass the parcel, someone's about to dig up more than buried memories. And there are a lot of people that are comparing this to the Thursday Murder Club, which I think is funny because at the end of the synopsis it says, darkly funny, sharply observant, and unquestionably deadly. This is no Thursday Murder Club. But then you have people that are reviewing it and giving anecdotes and quotes for the book, and they're saying that it's like the Thursday Murder Club. So I'll be interested to see how it is, but I'm gonna go ahead and jump straight into that. It's a little over 300 pages, so fingers crossed I will read this one pretty quickly, but I'll give you an update when I get close to that 50% mark or if I have any thoughts before then, and then I will let you know how I'm feeling about the book. All right. This has to be the world's fastest update because my camera is literally about to die. But I guess the good news is I don't really have too much to say. So I am just past the halfway point and remember where you've buried the bodies. And honestly, the first like 20 to 25% has been miserable for me to get through. It really felt like such a slog, and I don't know what it is about the writing or the way that they're piecing the story together, but I just honestly, I probably could not care less. That's the problem, is that I care so little about what's happening. And just now at like 53%, we got introduced to a new character and something kind of major happened. So I'm hoping that the rest of the book picks up and that I read it really, really quickly. But so far, I'm not really connecting with any of the characters. And I think the author is making an attempt to make it seem like any one of the characters that we're focusing on could be the perpetrator and could be the person responsible for the people who are dead or missing. But I kind of just feel like the author is missing the mark with that a little bit. We have these like italicized chapters where it's not clear who's telling the story in those chapters. And those are normally the ones that are giving us backstory about people who are missing or are dead. And originally, I thought that it was just supposed to be in the synopsis, it mentioned an old man bringing up like people who maybe were killed. And so originally I thought the italicized chapters were just supposed to be his memories. But based on the way the book is going and some of the things that you learn about the other characters, I think the intention is that it's meant to be that it could be anyone who is telling those italicized chapters. So far, I'm not really enjoying the book very much, but I will let you know how I'm feeling once I have completely finished it. All right, well, I finished Remember Where You've Buried the Bodies, and unfortunately, it did not get any better. I am going to have to rate this one 2 stars, which is super unfortunate. I was really excited to read this book based on the synopsis and the premise. It sounded like it was going to be a really fun, humorous murder mystery, and I don't think any of those words really describe this book well. Unfortunately, I think the narrative from start to finish was just pretty weak. It wasn't well built, so you would jump from one character to the next, but it didn't seem to follow a meaningful route in terms of unpacking the mystery and figuring out what was going on. Almost immediately after my last update, I did get another italicized chapter where I thought it was 100% confirming who those chapters had been from the perspective of, which then made me question what I had said in my last update. But then moving forward, I still felt like some of those italicized chapters could be from different people's perspective. So it was a little confusing in that sense, just because the writing would start to lead you down one path and then it wouldn't seem to line up with anything that you had been reading. And there were also just a lot of characters. Even at the midway point, we were being introduced to more characters. And honestly, I really felt like that detracted from the story overall. There were some things that happened towards the end of the book that should have really increased the excitement and the desire to read and find out what was going to happen. But unfortunately, those just fell really, really flat. And I will say that the ending of the book was pretty disappointing. I wasn't really satisfied with how things wrapped up. So I feel like the synopsis of this book was just pretty misleading. And then I wasn't really a fan of the characters, the writing, or the overall plot of the book. So for those reasons, I did go ahead and rate it 2 stars, and I gave all that feedback in my review on NetGalley. So personally, I wouldn't recommend that one, and I am a little bit frustrated because I feel like this one took me so long to read that with that plus being sick, I honestly felt like it was going to put me in a reading slump, and I definitely don't want to be in a reading slump, especially coming off of August being one of my best reading months so far this year. And because this book took me so long to read, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get to the third arc that I had hoped to read in this video, which is the Oxford Soju Club, which I will still be reading this month and providing feedback on, but I'm just not going to have time to get to it in this video. So those things combined with how I felt about the actual book itself were pretty frustrating, and I feel like giving it 2 stars feels pretty generous to me right now. But thankfully, in addition to that book, we did read Pantomime by L.R. Lamb at the start of this video, and I did rate that one 4 stars. I went to try to get the second book in that trilogy on NetGalley, but it unfortunately wasn't available. And based on a search, it looks like the re-release version of the second book is going to come out in November. So that will definitely be a series that I plan to continue because I do want to see where that goes. But overall, this video was a pretty mixed bag. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to the third book I had planned on getting to in this video, but unfortunately, I just wouldn't let myself DNF, Remember Where You've Buried the Bodies, because I did owe NetGalley a review for that. So ultimately, we'll just get to those 2 books today. And if you'd like to know more about getting ARCs and building up your ratio on NetGalley so that you can get approved for more popular books, I'd be happy to talk about that more in a future video. I do have 3 more ARCs that are going to be due for review in October, so if you all enjoyed this, I'd be happy to talk more about the actual process of getting ARCs and read those for you all and give you my feedback then. But that being said, as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you, and I love getting to spend time with you. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!